Now, we're talking with Pastor Carl Gallups down at Milton, Florida, the pastor of Hickory Hammock Baptist Church down there, a church that has a ministry that is worldwide, and of course the ministry of Pastor Carl Gallups is worldwide as well. Now, this is another opinion type of question here that I'm presenting to you. Recently, the president signed an executive order. That order was numbered 501-C-3, 501-C-3. And so the executive order is regarding churches, and I know a lot of churches are tuned in here today, and a lot of churches here are endorsing candidates. And so just tell me about this and what you think, and I think I know the answer, so come on in.
Well, you probably do know the answer, Brother Carl, but you might not know all of my thoughts on it and the take that I have on it, because, see, here's the thing. 501c3 has been maligned, actually, by a lot of people for a long time. I have heard pastors and pundits say, if any church is a 501c3, they're selling out to the government. They're committing sin. I've heard people say that I would never be aligned with any 501c3 ministry because they're just basically a puppet of the government. And if you're a 501c3, you can't get involved in politics, and there are certain issues that you cannot preach and things that you cannot talk about, like abortion and homosexuality and gay marriage and matters of Israel and whether they should give up land, etc., because these are all political issues, and even evolution. I've heard people say we can't talk about evolution and creation because that's the law of the land and it's taught in schools, and that's a political issue, and we're 501c3. Well, here's the truth about 501c3, and then I want to speak exactly to what President Trump did and the pros and cons. There are cons to what he just did. The truth about 501c3, if any of your listeners, whether they're pastors or church administrators, whatever, if they would check me out on this, they'll discover that everything I'm going to say is 100% accurate. First of all, I've been the senior pastor of one church on the Gulf Coast for 31 years. And in those 31 years, I have been deeply involved in politics, and so has our church. We are 501c3. And whenever I say that, people say, yeah, well, you just haven't got caught yet. No. The reason nothing has happened is because we haven't broken any law. Well, how can you be deeply involved in politics? And by the way, I preach all the time about evolution and creation, about gay marriage, about what the Bible really says about homosexuality, about abortion, about Israel, and all of these things. I preach about them all the time. I spoke of all the atrocities that were going on in the Obama years and the Clinton years and, yes, the Bush years, and I spoke about it from the pulpit. And people say, well, you're lucky you didn't get a visit from the IRS. No, I'm not lucky. It's because I was not breaking the law. This is what people don't understand, Brother Carl. 501c3, it's called the Johnson Amendment. Basically, and I can even explain the history of it, but the bottom line is this. All it prohibits a church from doing is endorsing a singular candidate who is running for a public office and then raising money for that candidate using tax-free church funds and giving it to that one person. You can't do that. And I think that's a fair rule. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. But you can speak to any issue you desire. You can even give money to issues like pregnancy resource centers. Listen, for many years, for decades, our county was a dry county. And I got involved. It's now wet, but of course, I've been here for over a quarter of a century. But in every election, our church got involved to try to keep the county dry, and our church was the single largest giving entity into keeping the county dry than any other entity, organization, or individual. We gave directly from our funds. We took up special collections. And we're 501c3. You say, well, how can you do that? Because the 501c3 laws specifically say you can do that. This is what a lot of people don't know. If it's only 4 paragraphs, go to the internet and read it. It's very simple, but there's been a lot of misconception and misinformation out there about 501c3. Now, I've even had political forums in my church. Now, I don't do that on Sunday mornings because our Sunday mornings are reserved for nothing but the Word of God and the exaltation of Jesus Christ. But on Sunday evenings and Wednesday evenings, we've had political forums. It's perfectly legal to do that if you're 501c3. All you have to do, though, is to make sure that you invite every candidate who's running for a specific office. So, for example, if I wanted to have a forum of people who are running for sheriff, as long as I invited every candidate, now it doesn't matter if they come or not. If there are 5 people running and only one of them shows up, then that one person gets to have the floor for the whole evening, provided that I invited all 5. That's perfectly legal. Now, also as an individual pastor, I put signs for individual people in my yard. I give money to individual people for their campaigns, state, local, federal, and it's perfectly legal because a pastor does not lose his right as an American citizen just because he pastors a 501c3 church. So you can tell I'm a little passionate about this, Brother Carl, because there's been so much misinformation out there. Some of it is just misinformation. Some of it is lazy pastors hiding behind a law that they know their parishioners don't understand. And they don't want to preach about those controversial things. And they don't want to get involved in politics. So they run around saying, well, we're 501c3, so I can't do that. But they're misleading their congregants. Of course they can do that. The only thing the law used to say was you cannot take a single candidate. Like we could not at our church have said, okay, this church is going to support Donald Trump, and we're going to take up a love offering this morning, and whatever we collect, we're going to give it to Donald Trump. And oh, by the way, it's tax-free. And oh, by the way, you'll get a tax deduction if you give to this. You see, that's why the law was put into place, because you can imagine how that would be abused. I mean, even the leftists, they could run out and create an organization and call it a church. And they could apply for 501c3 status, and then they could support a candidate and funnel their money through there tax-free. So that's why the law was made, and that's why I have always supported the 501c3 law, because not only that, I would never endorse a singular candidate. I mean, Billy Graham, as much as I love Billy Graham, he got caught up in that with Richard Nixon. Back in the days of Richard Nixon, Billy Graham came out and publicly endorsed Richard Nixon and talked about what a godly, fine man Richard Nixon was. And of course, when that all blew up, Billy Graham was embarrassed and he vowed that he would never do that again. So the bottom line is now Donald Trump, in the goodness of his heart, I do believe, keeping a promise he made to the churches, because I don't know that Donald Trump really understood this either, because he's never been a pastor like I have and has lived it like I have. But he promised that when he became president, he would do away with that requirement. Well, the good thing is, okay, well, that's good, because if I ever do want to endorse a candidate and launder money through the church tax-free to give to a candidate, I can now do it by federal law. That's the good thing. The bad thing is the leftists are going to take advantage of this, and they're going to do the same thing. And there's going to be so much chicanery, so much deception out there. I'm afraid this is going to backfire. But it's all based upon the misinformation that people have had, Brother Carl, that if you're a 501c3, somehow you just can't get involved in politics and you can't even speak about issues from the pulpit. But that is not true. I don't know if that helped or not, Brother Carl, but does that make sense?
Not only did it make sense, it's the truth, and I certainly respect the truth, and that's what we're noted for here on the airwaves of WTSB, getting down to the truth, and I think you've spoken it eloquently and just as it ought to be spoken. I agree with every word, every thought, every idea. You're 1,000% correct in my opinion.
Well, thank you. And if I discover, that I'm wrong on something there, I'll be glad to come on your station and make it right, of course, because I always want to be truthful as well. And